Welcome to Mindset Rebuild Deep Dive. I'm Warren, and today we're entering dangerous territory. Not because it's controversial, but because it's clear. And clarity, my friend, that's the real danger in a world built on noise. Let's begin with part one, which I call the high cost of clarity and why it's worth it. Let me introduce you to someone who knew this better than anyone. Baruch Spinoza. Not a king, not a revolutionary, just a 23-year-old lens grinder who saw the truth too clearly and was cast out for it. His story? It's not just about philosophy, it's about what happens when you choose alignment over approval, when you choose truth over belonging, when you build a system for your life without asking permission. Let's dive in. The day truth became a crime. It's July 27th, 1656. In a synagogue in Amsterdam's Jewish quarter, a public decree is being read aloud. Thunderous, final. Baruch Spinoza, just 23, is excommunicated. The harem wasn't just a spiritual expulsion. It was total exile. No synagogue, no community, no business, no contact. Why? The official reason: abominable heresies, monstrous deeds. But the real reason? Clarity. Spinoza had quietly, logically started questioning the assumptions that held everything together. What if God isn't a person, but the substance of nature itself? What if the Bible isn't literal, but historical? What if the path to virtue isn't obedience, but understanding? He wasn't loud, he wasn't rebellious. But that's what made it worse. You see, when someone whispers what you've been afraid to think, it cuts deeper than a scream. Okay, so now let's discuss what this means for you. Spinoza's story isn't ancient history. It's a mirror. Because every time you gain clarity about your work, your purpose, your beliefs, you will face resistance, not because you're wrong, but because you've become inconvenient to someone's comfort zone. This is what happens when creators evolve. You outgrow a client, but they want the old version of you. You question your niche, and your audience gets nervous. You set boundaries, and people call you selfish. The moment you stop editing your life to stay likable, you become a threat. Not because you've changed too much, but because you've stopped pretending. That leads us to the real reason most people quit. It's not burnout. It's not imposter syndrome. It's the fear of being misunderstood. That moment when the people who once cheered for you start backing away, when your own friends look at you sideways, when your audience doesn't get the new message, and that hurts, especially when you're building something from the inside out. But here's the truth. Misunderstanding is often the final gate before real alignment. Spinoza didn't beg to be heard. He didn't post angry rebuttals. He walked away and built something better. From community to clarity, he left the only community he had ever known. And what did he do? He changed his name from Baruch to Benedictus. He supported himself by grinding lenses, and he started writing. Quietly, methodically, without needing to be seen. That's what mental sovereignty looks like. Not rebellion, not performance, just choosing to protect your clarity more than your reputation. So, here's CEO Life OS insight number one, the clarity filter. Clarity isn't a one-time insight, it's a discipline. The more you evolve, the more often you'll need to ask, what am I still doing to feel accepted? What's no longer true for me? What clarity am I hiding because it feels too soon? You can't grow if your decisions are still shaped by the version of you who needed permission. That's the first principle of CEO Life OS. Operate from clarity, not consensus. As we wind up part one of this episode, here's a final thought. Spinoza didn't lose everything because he was dangerous. He lost everything because he was free. And if you're feeling the same way, misunderstood, uncertain, a little alone. You're probably closer to sovereignty than you think, but clarity without structure is fragile. So in part 2, we'll explore what Spinoza did next, how solitude became his strategy, and how building quietly might be the key to your next leap. And if you're already nodding, subscribe to the CO Life OS newsletter at mindsetrebuild.substack.com. It's where clarity gets systematized and your truth becomes your leverage. See you in part 2. Let me ask you something. Are you building your life or borrowing everyone else's? If you're still stuck in learning mode, scrolling podcasts and newsletters but not executing, then you don't need more free content. You need a system and accountability. That's what my Mindset Rebuild newsletter's CEO Life OS Premium tier subscription delivers. A vault of clarity tools, monthly mindset plus strategy challenges, and frameworks that help you lead instead of react. If you're getting value here, don't just listen, commit. Go to mindsetrebuild.substack.com and join the paid tier, $9 per month. Cancel anytime. Stay if it works. Welcome back to Mindset Rebuild Deep Dive. This is part 2 of our 3-part exploration of clarity, exile, and inner alignment through the life of a quiet revolutionary named Baruch Spinoza. In part 1, we talked about the real cost of clarity and how being misunderstood is often the gate you pass through on the way to freedom. Now, let's go deeper, because once you've said the thing that got you exiled, once you've walked away from the noise, you enter the space most people avoid at all costs, solitude. But here's the paradox. That silence you fear, it's the very thing that gives your voice power. Let's explore how, beginning with the beauty and burn of solitude. After Spinoza was excommunicated, he didn't fight to be let back in. He didn't campaign to be reaccepted. He quietly withdrew and began a new kind of life, one with no followers, no platform, no public support. He worked as a lens grinder. He rented small rooms. He wrote his thoughts, slowly, methodically, without worrying who would read them. But don't mistake that quiet for weakness. Spinoza's solitude wasn't exile, it was strategy. Because here's what most people miss. Solitude is where your clarity matures. It's where raw insight becomes refined thinking. It's where reaction gets replaced by reflection. It's where you remember who you are without anyone else's commentary. Now let's be real. Modern creators rarely get here. Most of us live plugged in. We wake up to notifications. We check what's trending. We create for algorithms, not alignment. And the cost? You never access your original thinking. You're too busy reacting to someone else's. But the creators who build movements, the ones whose work stands the test of time, they always go through a quiet season, a stretch of solitude, a period where no one claps, where nothing goes viral. That's not a failure. That's the forge. Spinoza spent nearly 20 years in that space, writing, thinking, grinding literal lenses to survive, while sharpening the metaphysical lens of his philosophy. So now let's turn the mirror on you. What are you avoiding by staying visible? If you're honest, are you building in public because it's aligned, or because you're afraid of going inward? Sometimes showing up every day is a disguise, a way to avoid sitting with your unfiltered clarity, a way to delay the discomfort of reinvention, a way to feel productive while avoiding the work that actually matters. Here's your permission slip. You're allowed to go quiet to get clear. You're allowed to disappear for a season so you can reemerge with depth. Not as a new persona, but as the real you, finally unfiltered. That's not quitting. That's stepping into creative sovereignty. You see, Spinoza's greatest power was what he refused to do. Let me repeat that. Spinoza's greatest power was restraint. He didn't explain himself. He didn't defend himself. He didn't fight for a place in a system he'd already outgrown. He chose a life of reflection, simplicity, and quiet production. He declined job offers, like a university chair in Heidelberg, because the role required him to avoid disturbing the dominant religion. And he said no. Because truth doesn't come with conditions. And that's your second CEO Life OS insight. Protect your clarity by setting boundaries around where it can be distorted. That might mean saying no to a brand partnership that doesn't align, pausing your content calendar to recenter your message, turning down a client who pays well but costs you your voice. The money's not worth it if it bankrupts your alignment. And remember, solitude doesn't mean isolation. Here's an important distinction. Spinoza was alone, but he wasn't lonely. He surrounded himself with a handful of deep thinkers, not fans, not followers, collegians, freethinkers, philosophical pen pals. They didn't tell him what to say. They asked him better questions. That's a powerful model. As you protect your solitude, make sure you also curate your counsel. The people who challenge your reasoning, not your identity. Support your evolution, not just your success. Remind you who you are when the noise tries to make you forget. This is what we call a growth circle inside CEO Life OS. Here's a practical application for you to try, your solitude sprint. You don't need to disappear for 2 decades, but you do need rhythm, a practice, space where your thoughts can land without interruption. Try this. Block 90 minutes in the next 48 hours. No inputs, no apps, no external voices, just you, a blank page, and the question, what do I know that I'm afraid to say? Let it pour out. Not for content, not for packaging, just for truth. Because that truth becomes your compass. And without it, everything you build will bend under pressure. Let's wrap up part 2 with this closing thought. Most people think growth is loud, but the most dangerous kind of growth? It's the quiet kind, the kind that rewires your worldview in solitude, the kind that removes all the noise until you're left with something unshakable, the kind that reemerges, not as a plea for approval, but as a new standard for how you live. That's what Spinoza did, and it's what you're invited to do too. Coming up in part 3, we'll talk about systems, specifically how Spinoza wrote ethics like a geometric proof, and how you can build a personal OS that anchors your clarity, protects your momentum, and sustains your truth long after the hype fades. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Let me ask you something. Are you building your life or borrowing everyone else's? If you're still stuck in learning mode, scrolling podcasts and newsletters but not executing, then you don't need more free content. You need a system and accountability. That's what my Mindset Rebuild Newsletter's CEO Life OS Premium tier subscription delivers. A vault of clarity tools, monthly mindset plus strategy challenges, and frameworks that help you lead instead of react. If you're getting value here, don't just listen, commit. Go to mindsetrebuild.substack.com and join the paid tier. All right, this is part 3 in our exploration of clarity, exile, and mental sovereignty through the story of Baruch Spinoza. In part 1, we uncovered the real reason most people are punished, not for being wrong, but for seeing too clearly. In part 2, we talked about solitude, not as exile, but as a strategy, the kind of deep silence most creators avoid, but need. Now in part 3, we land where most people never do. We're talking about systems, not productivity hacks, not morning routines. We're talking about building a personal philosophy, an operating system that outlasts applause, withstands misunderstanding, and keeps you aligned when the world tries to knock you off course. And once again, Spinoza shows us the way. First, from philosophy to geometry, When Spinoza died in 1677, he left behind his magnum opus entitled Ethics. But ethics wasn't written like a book. It was structured like a math proof. Axioms, definitions, propositions, corollaries, step by step. No fluff, no emotion, just pure structured clarity. Why? Because Spinoza didn't want his ideas to be inspirational. He wanted them to be undeniable, unshakable, unarguable, self-sustaining. And that's the lesson. Clarity without structure is fragile. But clarity with structure, that becomes momentum. You see, most creators build on emotion, not architecture. Let's get honest. Most people, especially creatives and solopreneurs, build based on vibes. A post goes viral, so they pivot. A client gets mad, so they shrink. A launch flops, so they question everything. Their clarity is real, but it's unstable because it's not grounded in a system. Here's the hard truth. If you can't explain your personal philosophy in 5 lines or less, you don't have one. You have preferences, you have influences, but you don't have a system. So with that, let's discuss what a system really is and isn't. Let's redefine the word system. It's not a Notion board. It's not an app stack. It's not a funnel or calendar template. Those are tools. A system is your way of being made visible and repeatable. Spinoza built his around this insight. God is not a person. God is nature. And to live well is to understand the structure of nature and align with it. His system didn't require approval. It didn't rely on rituals. It didn't collapse under criticism. It was self-contained. Your system should be too. The CEO Life OS is built for this. Let's bring this home. As a solopreneur, creator, or leader, you need something stronger than motivation. You need a system that protects your clarity from chaos, a framework that helps you. Filter what's true for you, not just what's trending. Make decisions from values, not fear. Rebuild your focus when life gets noisy. That's what CEO Life OS gives you. A weekly structure that aligns with your goals, mental clarity prompts to reset your inner compass, execution filters so you stop building what doesn't serve you, solitude sprints to refine your vision without feedback distortion. It's not about controlling every hour of your day. It's about protecting the beliefs that matter most. Because when you lose that, you lose yourself. Spinoza didn't need an audience. He built for the ages. Here's what inspires me most about Spinoza. He didn't build for applause. He didn't build for the algorithm of his time. He didn't write ethics to go viral. He wrote it so that 300 years later, people would still be reading it and saying, "This changed how I see the world." That's the real ROI of clarity. And here's what that means for you. Don't just build what gets likes. Build what lasts. Build what reflects your clearest self. Build something that, even if misunderstood now, won't need to be defended later. Because time always catches up to clarity. So here's your challenge. Should you choose to accept it, create your 5-line personal philosophy. Let's make this practical. I want you to create your mental architecture, a 5-line personal philosophy that grounds your week. Here's mine. I create before I consume. I say what I believe, even if it costs me reach. I only build systems I'd still use at half the income. I define success by alignment, not applause. I speak to the few who get it, not the many who don't. What's yours? Write it down. Live it. That's your ethics. Let's wrap up this episode with this final thought. Your life is a proof. Spinoza didn't need to convince everyone. He just needed to be congruent with himself. He didn't chase clarity in others. He built clarity in himself. He didn't try to be understood. He structured his life so well, the world eventually came around, and now it's your turn. Let misunderstanding be the proof you're on the right path. Let solitude be the forge where your voice gets sharp. Let your system become your structure, your OS. Because no matter what you build, if it's not aligned, it won't last. But if it's true, it doesn't need to be loud. Look, if this podcast is hitting a nerve, chances are you've been riding the free train for a while. No judgment. But here's the deal. If you're serious about becoming the CEO of your life, it's time to go deeper than passive inspiration. Paid subscribers to CEO Life OS get the real stuff. Templates, tools, and execution challenges, private breakdowns from behind the scenes, and access to my system for staying clear, focused, and unfuckwithable. So if this episode made you think, stop lurking, start leading. Go to mindsetrebuild.substack.com and upgrade to paid, $9 per month. It's less than your mediocre coffee and 10 times more useful.